your, thought process is that this money is going to create all of these other things that money doesn't actually have the power to do, right? Money doesn't have the power to make your marriage stronger in many cases. Money doesn't have the power to make your kids like you more than they already do, right? Like money doesn't buy those sorts of transformations. So then the success can feel very empty. You really have to find a way to align the success metrics with the personal values. Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. You've hit your revenue goals. Yay! You built your team. Maybe you even have achieved that elusive freedom and flexibility in your schedule, the one that gets us all to open up our own business. And yet, if you're really, really honest, it just doesn't quite feel like you thought it would, right? If your success right now feels hollow, you're not broken, but you might be measuring the wrong things. And so today, Gwen and I are going to talk about why sometimes success, and actually I would say all the time, success without satisfaction feels like a failure, and how you can redefine success so that it actually feels good for you right where you're at. So Gwen, I think I want to start this off with you telling me, maybe you've had this example, maybe somebody you know has had this example, but have you ever had the experience where you've achieved a big milestone, but it just kind of feels like blah, like almost like the day after Christmas, it's like, eh.
I think everyone has experienced that at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a couple reasons it can happen. So for one of mine, years and years ago, it was me getting my book published. And, part of it is it was a big goal. It was a long goal. It wasn't actually a goal that I had ever set out to do. It was one of those things that writing a book was not on my list as like, and before I die, I want to write a book, But as things happened and unfolded, it was like, yeah, no, this book needs to be written. It needs to come out of me. This does need to happen. But it's a long, long process.
Right.
And then you write it and you think all of these things are going to happen. And probably some of them do sort of, but they rarely live up to your expectation of what they were, right? So it's the classic where you've actually set expectations or goals or emotions around a thing that probably have minimal chance of actually delivering those things. Right?
Yeah.
So you get there and it's good. You got there. You did all the things, but somehow it's not quite good enough for what you were hoping for. And I think that's one of the challenges that we often have is we are postponing our satisfaction, our joy, our whatever until we reach the goal. And then we get to the goal and we realize that didn't actually deliver the joy, the satisfaction, the emotion, whatever thing is. And so I think that's one of the places that we can have, a huge, huge letdown. I mean, my book, by all accounts, by everything that you would measure, was completely successful. It did all of the things that, there's actually a really fairly good list to it. But I also remember thinking this wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that you use the example of a book because this is like almost always true in the publishing space because first of all, a lot of people spend way more time wanting to write a book and wanting to publish a book than it actually takes to do it. Mm-hmm. Second, a lot of people believe that once you publish a book, you go from writer to author. You're an author. And they think being an author is going to give them all this validity and expertise and respect. And they actually realize that they're no different the day that their book comes out than they were the day before. Like the person who went to bed the night before is still the person who wakes up in that bed.
Mm-hmm.
And most people around you don't actually care that you wrote a book, and they like whatever comes out of your mouth has no more or less importance to them than it did before the book came out.
Right.
And so I think that's a really, really good example. And it also kind of brings me to thinking about, like, why does this matter? Why does empty success matter? Because on one hand, you might say, well, you don't need to feel good about it, right? You've got enough money. You can go do other things to make you feel good. But I do think that when we're living this life that's outwardly successful, that doesn't feel internally fulfilling, things start to feel harder than they really are, and that leads to resentment, that leads to burnout. And I think sometimes it can lead to an identity crisis. We start convincing ourselves we're not as good as we thought we were, right? We start saying that even though we've got the zeros in the bank account that show success, we start telling ourselves we're not as successful as we think we are, or we start worrying about everybody finding out our deep, dark secret.
And I think the latter is the bigger, that we don't want anyone to know that we're disappointed, either because we feel like it's a big, deep, dark secret, or it's the other side of it, which is, so you've got all this success and you're not grateful for it. You're not appreciative of it. It's like, well, no, I am, but it's not doing what I wanted it to do.
Right.
Right. And so I think that's where, where the challenge is. And I do think it happens. I mean, I think there's several kind of what I'm going to call iconic ways that this happens, right? One is we believe when we get to X, whatever goalpost, whatever, target that is, however we've defined that somehow a whole lot of things are going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there are some things that are going to be different, right? And the fact that there's, I'm not going to say there's nothing different, because that's never true either. But it's rarely the things that we thought were going to be different. Kind of what you were just saying, that, the person who went to bed yesterday who did not yet have a book published, and the person who wakes up today who does have a book published, is actually the exact same person. Mm-hmm. Really didn't change us. So I think that's one iconic way that we get stuck, is we think things will be different when, and things aren't actually different when.
Right.
Right. I think that's one. I think another version of it is where we have changed as part of the journey, and what we wanted no longer is what we wanted. Right. Not that what we wanted wasn't right. It was what we wanted at the time.
Right.
But it's no longer appropriate for where we are today. Right. And it could be, and just because numbers are easy, it could be what I want is a solid 6-figure business. And you get into a solid 6-figure business and you say, not satisfied with that. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's because what you realize is, no, what I really want is a 7-figure business and all the things that go with it. Mm-hmm. Maybe you also realize what I really want is a lower 6-figure business that doesn't have any of the responsibility that I had before.
Right.
Right. It could go both ways. It could be bigger, but it also could be like, oh, I got here. I don't actually want all of the things that come with this, but I couldn't have known it without doing the thing first.
Right.
And often we don't give that part enough credit. We seem like, oh, well, I should have known that I wouldn't really want all of these things. Well, sometimes we don't know until we get there, right? I think that's another big issue. And then the third one is actually a version of where we say we're hitting the goal, but we're not hitting the goal because we're always moving the goalposts. So we say, what I really want is a 7-figure business. And at the moment that we've done $1 million, in sales this year, we say, well, what I really meant was a stable $1 million business. And so then we're like, okay, so we need it to be stable. Then we say, well, but stable really means that it's like, mid 7. We just keep kind of moving those goalposts because we've been taught not to stop and appreciate how far we came.
Right.
So those are, there's probably more, but those are kind of the three versions that popped into my head as we started talking about this. And I think most entrepreneurs will fall into one of those at some point in time.
Yeah. And I think regardless of which one you fall into, right, it typically all ends the same, right? Burned out, resentful, full of self-doubt, or overworking, right? You're like constantly like trying to like outrun whatever demons. What I'm curious about though is, okay, so say you're there. How do you shift out of there? So the person who's sitting there going, okay, this isn't all that it's cracked up to be, but I faked it till I made it. Now I'm here and I kind of don't want to fake it anymore, but I'm still having to fake it. How do you shift from that into a place that feels more aligned?
So I think the first is being really clear of what did the thing that you were trying to achieve, what was the result that you were actually wanting out of that? We talk about this a lot, that we tend to focus on income because it's an easy measurement, right? We know how to measure money. It's one that we can measure super easily within our businesses. And so it's the easiest, KPI to track. It's the easiest thing to set goals around. But very few of us, I mean, there's probably some exceptions out there, but very, very few of us are actually motivated by the money. We're motivated by what the money can create or do for us or allow for us to do, right? And so the first is to say, what really is the thing that motivates us? What are we really trying to go for? And then once we know that, it's kind of the standard, like ask yourself why 5 times. So, but why is that important? Why is that important? Trying to get down to the actual root cause of it. Now, I did have some disappointment with my book, but I only had a tiny bit compared with several others of my friends who were published with the same publisher, who had very similar paths that I did back to. I know enough of their context to know that we had similar kinds of context. A lot of them were way, way, way more disappointed in their publishing experience than I was within a year of each other, right? Because I had different expectations of why I was publishing the book.
Right.
Right. And I knew why I was publishing the book. I was not publishing it for the royalties. Most people are publishing the book with this belief of what the royalties are going to bring you. And the royalties are, unless you're James Patterson, the royalties do, or Stephen King, or, somebody that is kind of a household name. The royalties rarely are doing what you think they should be doing. I was looking for the royalties to basically cover my cost of writing the book in the first place. And it did that. So I was okay from that financially. But what I knew for me is that would allow me more opportunities to teach at yarn shops. This was a yarn book. And that's what I got. Right. And so understanding what's my real motivation for this. Now, like I said, there were still some disappointments in that. It didn't get me quite as much as I thought. There were other things around it that was like, but I didn't have as much disappointment as a lot of folks because I knew what my motivation was and I stayed focused on my motivation, which for me was to be able to teach more.
Right. And you weren't looking at the book to define your success, or even your level of professionalism.
No, it was one of the things that I joked about the whole time is somehow I became a much better teacher the day that the book came out, even though I know the reason the book was good was because I was a way better teacher way before the book came out.
Right. Yes. Okay. So I think I can kind of sum up what you said as really being, if you've achieved what you thought would be successful or outward success, but it's not feeling successful, the first thing that you really want to do is take some time to think about, journal, write about, but identify what it is you thought you would be getting at this point. Is it that you thought, some other examples, right? Maybe you thought you had, at this level, you wouldn't have to work nights anymore. You wouldn't have to work weekends anymore. Or maybe you thought at this level, you wouldn't be on call. Maybe you thought at this level, you wouldn't have to market your business anymore. Everybody would come calling on you, right? Like these are all different things that you may associate with a certain level of success. So first you want to identify what is it that you thought you were going to get that you don't feel like you have? Or if you did get what you thought you were going to get, what is it that is not satisfactory?
Right. One of the things that we see a lot in the clients that we work with is part of what they realize when we start working together is although they've achieved the goal wasn't ever actually their goal.
Mm-hmm.
It was society's goal. It was their family's goal. It was their spouse's goal.
Mm-hmm.
It was some story in their head's goal of this will equal that. And when you can get clear and say, oh yeah, that actually has, these two things have nothing to do with one another, and say, oh, but what does matter is, that's the point that then we can start thinking about how do we realign what we're doing to more closely match the thing that we actually care about that will bring us satisfaction, that is motivating to us, not because we're supposed to be motivated by it, but because we actually are motivated by it.
Right. Okay. So now I want to kind of talk about like some practical steps, because we've talked about why this happens. We've talked about like what are the negative consequences of it happening. We've talked about how to make the shift. Now let's talk about the practical steps, just offer some practical tips of how to get from here to there. So let's just say I thought a 6-figure business would give me a fully funded retirement account and also let me volunteer at my kids' school twice a week. But what I have now found is that my 6-figure business actually requires a 60-hour work week from me. Okay, so I know what I thought this was going to get me. I see what's different. And now I know, right, my actual definition of success is my retirement account fully funded? And am I able to volunteer 2 days a week at my kids' school, which would be approximately during the hours of, say, 8 and 2? What are the steps I need to take in order to get to that actual reality I want?
So the first thing is what we call is define the differential, which is saying, okay, so what I'm actually making is X and what I need to make is Y. Maybe it's the same, but what I'm actually working is 60 hours and what I need to work is 30 hours.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Wherever any of those differentials are, start defining of where I am versus where I actually need to be to hit those goals. Right? And then we have to start saying what has to change to make those things happen. Right? Sometimes, and this is very counterintuitive when it comes to time, but sometimes all we have to do with time is create our own boundaries and stick to them. A lot of times when people say, well, I'm just working way too many hours, when we really start getting down to it, it's like, why am I able to get the exact same amount of work done in half the hours? It's because you're actually only doing the work that you actually need to do, and you aren't filling it with a lot of busy and other things, because if you're like me, you were raised with parents who hard work is the answer. And so you've got this mindset of if I'm not working all the time, I'm not valuable. Right? So sometimes it's about understands like, how much time do I actually need for this work? Now, maybe in this example, you actually do have 60 hours of work and you only can work 30. So the question becomes, how do we reduce the hours and maintain the income? Well, there's lots of ways to do that. It comes down to what's going to be the best way for you. Maybe you bring in some people to help with some of the aspects of it. Now, that's going to keep your income the same, but now your expenses are going to go up, which means you probably need to raise your income to be able to support the additional expenses so that your actual money that you're taking out of the business is the same. Back to looking at these differentials to say, where do things change? But it could be, I'm going to work with half as many clients and I'm going to charge them twice as much.
Yep, that's one way to do it.
That could be a way to do it. Maybe you're not in a position to do that either because your level of expertise can't justify that rate. Maybe you can't mentally or, even externally say, I'm going to charge you X amount. Maybe you don't know how to find those clients. There's all sorts of reasons, but there's multiple ways to start figuring out what are the ways? And the way I would generally start is know what your differentials are and then brainstorm. Put every idea, no matter how crazy it is, on the table and say, what are all the ways that I could possibly fix this differential? What can I do to make this differential as small as possible? Once you start doing that, often what you'll see is like, well, this idea by itself is crazy and this idea by itself is crazy. But if I take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, I can kind of combine it. And all of a sudden we're getting really, really close. That's the power of entrepreneurs because they're visionaries, they're creative, they have lots of ideas. And this is one of those places we want to apply all of that creativity, that visionary, all of those ideas. Don't just stick with what people say will work. There are lots and lots and lots of answers, way more than you're even aware of. Come up with as many and as crazy as you can. Once you start doing that, say, this is a way we can start making it and go for adjusting that differential as much as you can. One of the things our friend Nick Peterson says, which I think is really also important, is to say, start making choices that get you closer to your answer instead of choices that will take you a roundabout way to your answer. Because the fastest way to your answer is a straight line.
Right. Okay. So, first of all, what we have done today is helped our listeners to appreciate that you can't decouple success from satisfaction without feeling some measure of failure, right? It just never feels good if you're not both successful and satisfied with the success. And I love a lot of your examples because all of them sort of tie to the fact that financial success in and of itself doesn't guarantee fulfillment. And in fact, what we have found a lot of times with women, it doesn't, right? Women tend to not be financially driven. Not that they're not motivated to make sales. That's two different things. It's just that the money in and of itself is not fulfilling.
No, it's always the money for what that means to them.
Right. It's what the money gets.
It's what the money gets, whether it's the house being cleaned by somebody else, whether it's a super nice vacation. Most of the time it's about what it gets. Sometimes it's about providing stability because I'm a single mother with 2 kids. There's a whole range of what it can be providing, but it's usually not about the money.
Right. And so if your, thought process is that this money is going to create all of these other things that money doesn't actually have the power to do, right? Money doesn't have the power to make your marriage stronger in many cases. Money doesn't have the power to make your kids like you more than they already do, right? Like money doesn't buy those sorts of transformations. So then the success can feel very empty. You really have to find a way to align the success metrics with the personal values. We talked quite a bit about redefining success for the stage of business you're at, right? So sometimes that success is more free time, and sometimes that success may be more authority, more autonomy. And then you walked us through a pretty nice, just very linear path of decision making to get from here to there, right? Those practical ways to create both the financial success you need, but also that personal satisfaction that you desire that's going to prevent the burnout, the resentment. So I think we've come to a good spot. Do you have anything else to add, Gwen?
I think the hardest part for all of us to do, and I think this is that we talk about it all the time. It's really, it's the title of the show, The Business You Really Want. But the hardest part of it is to own what you want as what you want, particularly when it's not the same as what most of the rest of the world wants or what they want for you.
Right. Or what they think you should want.
Or they think that you should want. Because almost always the dissatisfaction is I got to the thing and I don't actually care about the thing, but someone told me I should care about the thing, whatever it is, right? And when we can be really clear and say, no, the thing that I really care about, the thing that really motivates me is, and it can be bizarre. It can make absolutely no sense to anybody else on the planet. So long as it really is your motivation, if you get there, I can assure you, you are going to feel so much more satisfied than with anything else that's currently going on. But we've got to be okay knowing that when we achieve the thing that satisfies us, particularly if it feels kind of oddballish, that there's going to be a lot of blowback from other people saying, oh, well, that's not the right thing to want. That's not the right thing to achieve. And you have to really know it's yours. I think that's the hardest part about this. And to be okay to say, nope, this makes me really happy.
Yeah.
I realize it wouldn't make you happy, but it makes me happy.
Yeah, it's really giving yourself permission to pursue your definition of winning, of success, and celebrating it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the owning part. To be okay when someone pushes back and says, really? This is what you wanted? And to say, yeah, this is actually what I wanted.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so if you are in this place, like if you've been listening to this episode and you're just like, oh my gosh, that is so me. I am so there right now. Please follow Gwen's steps and try to find yourself a path out of it. Now, if you want some help, it's time for a clarity call. Like, cut to the chase, just get some outside perspective and dig into what really matters to you and how to build a business that feels successful, not just looks successful. You can get on Gwen's calendar at everydayeffectiveness.com/clarity. It'll be about a 20-minute call, but you can definitely get at least 1 to 2 steps to get from here to where you really want to be. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.